I am live. It is Monday morning, the 21st of August 2023, and I am reading out of Eyes of Horus. It's Joan Grant, or Joan Marshal Grants' book of her far memory. It plays in ancient Egypt, 3,500 years BC, and in this life she is Ra'ab. It's a son of a priestess of Ra, and heir to the nomarch of the Oryx. So he's already had an adventure, and I am now in the second part of this book, and it is chapter 4 of part 2, entitled Fear over Egypt. Since hearing from Dadas of Egypt beyond the Oryx, I waited eagerly for an opportunity to see Rodan. This came within a month, for Sibek told me to stay the night at Hotep Ra on my way with 10 soldiers to a village in the north of the Nome. The Rodan I knew was as different to the man of whom Dadas had told me, as was Sibek, the captain to the bay, whom Kias had sometimes teased until he almost wept. It was the Rodan who said to Hayab, I greet you in the name of the watchers of the horizon. I wish to know, and somehow I must convince him that he could talk to me as though I were not bounded by the Oryx or by my 14 years. He had welcomed Hayab because he had seen her in a dream. Could I not use the same key to unlock the door of his speech? But what if I dreamt of him and he did not remember? I tried very hard to meet him away from Earth, and I did so on the night before I reached his house. Though I brought back only a fragment of what must have been a long conversation, I remember him saying, yes, I shall remember this meeting, and to prove it, when we go into the garden I shall point to the pool and say, yesterday there were 5 lotus, how many are there today? And you must answer, another bud has opened, there are 6. I was so afraid of forgetting his exact words that I wrote them with a burned stick on the linen of my second kilt. I had nothing else with which to scribe, for we were sleeping out. I reached his house late that afternoon. The gate in the wall was open. The fig tree, which grew beside it, was very old, and I thought of Dada standing under it with a blind woman beside him. Had she doubted the strength of her dream as already I had begun to doubt in mine? I went straight to the garden of the pool. No one was there, and I stood staring down into the water, half expecting to see more than the shadows with which lotus leaves patterned the tiles. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Rodin coming through the opening in the wall beyond the pool. He gave me the greeting between father and son, and, standing with his arm around my shoulders, said, there were 6 lotuses in the pool yesterday. How many are there today? No, you should have said 5 lotuses yesterday, and I should answer 6 today, for another bud has just opened. He swung me around so that he could look at me, excited as a boy. You did remember. I was so afraid you wouldn't, that I only asked the question to convince myself that Ra'ab was not a dreamer of true dreams. But I was wrong. Never has a man been so glad to prove himself a fool. How your mother would have rejoiced to hear my question and your answer. Or perhaps she did hear them. Can you really see her? I asked eagerly. I have never seen her, even in my dream. He sighed. Only once since she died, and that too was to tell me to try to raise your father from his grief. I made him remember the Oryx, though I could not give him back joy, for he had given it into her keeping and would take it from no other hand. That night, Rodan talked to me until it was nearly dawn. I learned that other gnomes were not as ours, and that I might go from temple to temple across Egypt and not meet another priest such as those the Oryx knew. I shall always remember Rodan saying, when the 2 lands were known as calm, and the stone from which the great pyramids were raised still slept in the quarries, the Oryx would have been a province of little wisdom, for then were temples, torches in the land, and even the fear of Set had been forgotten. The pharaoh who built the two who remember, well, the pharaohs who built the two who remembers were wise in their power. Yet those who came after them only saw the shadow cast by these great pyramids and were blind to the light which is reflected from them. Gradually, the reason for their building was forgotten, and in its stead came worship of a mighty achievement. They were made enduring so that they should be landmarks for the soul through many journeys, but now they symbolize not power on earth, but power of earth. Since that time, many temples have been built, yet men have forgotten that a building has no virtue save that of the dweller therein, even as the body is a carrion safe for the spirit which houses in it. The stone of these new temples is dead stone, and the clay of the priests' houses is the dust of the tomb. The priests follow a ritual they do not understand, and those few amongst them who have power use it only for their own aggrandizement. Because they know so little, they must make mysteries. Having no real authority, they must keep themselves apart. Even if they can go beyond the 3 measurements of earth, they seldom understand the forces they evoke. The unknown is always feared, so it is to fear they make their sacrifices. Even those of them who call on the name of Ra direct their prayer to Set, the Lord of Fear. There is fear over Egypt, from Set to his priests, from priests to Pharaoh, spreading through all the channels which lead from them. No mark to oversee a village headman, to the youngest child who cries in terror of the dark. The power of Ra is his own power, but Set must draw his power from others. It is from those who acknowledge fear that Set and his consort Sekhmet derive their strength. How then has Set no power over the oryx? Your father, as you know, is the 4th of the direct line to be Nomak. Until your grandfather's time, this gnome was no different to any other, but he was a man of wisdom, though he had no temple training. When he succeeded his father, he saw that those who used to be his friends now feared him because he held authority. He knew that true authority can inspire only love, and that authority which gives birth to fear derives from force and has no virtue. At first it was difficult for him to cut down the rotten framework which the oryx shared with the rest of Egypt, but gradually he replaced dead wood by strong new growth. The overseers of his towns were chosen not because they were feared, but because they were beloved, and any man who abused his power found it was taken from him, even though his family had held office for 10 generations. Because he became worthy to be a friend, he made many enemies. The neighboring nomarchs were jealous of him, seeing that his lands prospered even in a time of famine. He told them that they too should build more granaries, so that good harvests could be stored against lean years. But they would not listen to him, seeing only the gold and ivory, purple and cedar wood, for which they bartered their supplies of grain, surplus grain. Your grandfather built no temples. He was intolerant of false priests and saw temples as the chief breeding ground of fear. He maintained the ritual observances of the old temples only because he knew that by doing otherwise he would give an excuse for the adjoining nomarchs to demand of Pharaoh that his land should be ceded to them. Yet the laws by which he governed were good laws, for he had in his possession a collection of old papyri, many of them dating from the time before the pyramids, and through them he found that the pharaohs of the old kingdom held the secret by which they ruled in peace. It was from the past, for instance, that he made the law by which orphans and old people, the sick and lame, are the care of him who owns the land on which they live. Then, as now, it was the law that those who could not pay the tribute to the 10th part would work for Pharaoh 4 months in every year, but except in the oryx, this law was abused. If Pharaoh wished to build a city too rapidly, the labor must be found without consideration for the source. If Pharaoh coveted monuments of stone fields, had to lie barren because there were no men left to plough them, and if nomarchs were idle, dikes decayed and irrigation channels fell in, so that the limits of fertility were often reduced to the point of famine. Men were judged by rank instead of by character. They could abuse their office and still retain it. Pharaoh could hold the crook and flail and betray them both. Tyrant or weakling, either were accepted if he wore the double crown. In the fullness of years your grandfather died, having brought that peace to the oryx in which you have grown. Your father is not so strong a man as your grandfather. He is content to continue with a pattern which already sat on the loom and does not wish to change the colour of a single thread. The body of the oryx was strong and clean, but they who brought it to the peace of Ra were your mother and Nectra. During the 5 years that she ruled, she caused your father to see with her eyes. The ritual priests were sent away, and in their place came our high priest, Neferank, who also came to the oryx seemingly by chance. It is 16 years since his first pupils began their temple training, and soon we shall no longer lack for priests, nor will there be a village without its temple counselor. In the days of the Old Kingdom, Pharaoh was high priest, the unity of temporal and divine power. For 5 years your father and mother achieved together this dual authority. But at her death he became a man whose sight is failing, and he could see only that which was near to him. Because the priests were her priests, he protected them and did them honor, but he was a man acting without initiative. One day, Ra, you will rule the oryx. In the far past you have known temple courts and held authority, and through you the peace of the oryx will spread beyond its boundaries, in the name of the watchers of the horizon. So, this battery is empty. I have to stop this here and we'll continue next time.